The blood on Preston Evans' hands would never wash clean. Or so he believed as he rode into Georgetown, Colorado territory in the summer of 1875, a man more shadow than substance. The mining town nestled in the Rocky Mountains was bustling with activity, prospectors, merchants, and townsfolk hurrying about their business as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty Main Street. Preston guided his chestnut gelding toward the livery stable, his shoulders hunched beneath his worn leather duster, his face hidden under the wide brim of his hat. 4 years on the run had taught him to keep his head down, his voice low, and his past buried deep. He wasn't looking to put down roots in Georgetown. He never stayed anywhere long enough for that. Just long enough to earn some money, gather supplies, and move on before his ghosts caught up with him. "Whoa, boy," Preston murmured, dismounting with a grimace. The bullet wound in his side, a parting gift from a bounty hunter in Denver, pulled painfully. He'd stitched it himself, but it was healing poorly. Sleeping rough and riding hard hadn't helped matters. The livery owner, a grizzled old-timer with a wild white beard, emerged from the shadows of the stable. "Need boarding for your horse, mister, just for a few days." Preston handed over the reins and a silver coin. "He needs grain and a good brushing." "That he does." The old man ran a hand along the horse's sweaty flank. "And what about you? Looks like you could use some tending to yourself." Preston stiffened. "I'll manage." The livery owner shrugged. "Suit yourself. Town's got a decent doctor, though, Dr. Wallace down by the apothecary." "Noted." Preston collected his saddlebags and bedroll, wincing as the movement strained his injury. "If you're looking for work," the old man added, "the Silver Queen mine's always hiring, pays fair, and they don't ask too many questions." That last part caught Preston's attention. Obliged for the information. He made his way down the main street, taking stock of his surroundings. Georgetown had the look of a town that had struck it, rich brick buildings interspersed with wooden structures, fancy glass windows displaying merchandise that would have seemed extravagant in lesser settlements. Silver mining had been good to this corner of Colorado. The Blue Mountain Saloon beckoned with the promise of whiskey and anonymity. Preston pushed through the batwing doors, his eyes scanning the dimly lit interior. It wasn't crowded, yet too early for the miners to finish their shifts. A few men nursed drinks at scattered tables, and a piano player half-heartedly tinkered out a tune in the corner. Preston ordered whiskey and took it to a corner table, his back to the wall, facing the door, an old habit. The liquor burned a welcome path down his throat, momentarily dulling the pain in his side. 2 whiskeys later, the saloon began to fill with miners, their faces and clothes covered in rock dust, their loud voices telling tales of narrow passages and rich veins of ore. Preston kept to himself, nursing his 3rd drink when a commotion at the bar drew his attention. "I said no credit," the barkeep was saying to a desperate-looking man in ragged clothes. "You've been promising to pay up for weeks now, Jenkins. Please, just 1 drink," Jenkins pleaded. "My boy's sick and I can't think straight. I swear I'll pay you double when I get my wages." "Your wages go straight to the opium den," said the barkeep, unmoved. "Now clear out before I have to call the sheriff." Jenkins' face crumpled, but before he could respond, the batwing doors swung open and a hush fell over the saloon. Preston's hand instinctively moved toward the revolver at his hip, then relaxed slightly when he saw it was a woman who'd entered. She was not what Preston would have expected in a mining town saloon. Tall and poised, dressed in a modest but well-made dark blue dress, her honey blonde hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She carried a leather doctor's bag. "Mrs. Wallace," the barkeep said, his tone suddenly respectful. "Mr. Harris," she replied with a nod. Her gaze found the slumped figure of Jenkins. "I've been looking for you, Mr. Jenkins. Your wife sent word that your son's fever has worsened." Jenkins hung his head. "I know, madam, I needed." "What you need is to be with your family," she said firmly but not unkindly. Then she turned to the barkeep. "Mr. Harris, please give Mr. Jenkins a hot meal to take home to his family. Put it on my account." The barkeep looked like he wanted to object but merely nodded. "Yes, madam." As the barkeep bustled off to prepare the food, the woman Mrs. Wallace spoke quietly to Jenkins. Preston couldn't hear what was said, but he saw her press something into the man's hand. Money, he guessed, before sending him on his way with the wrapped meal when it appeared. After Jenkins departed, Mrs. Wallace approached the bar. "I'll also need a bottle of whiskey, Mr. Harris, for medicinal purposes." "Of course, Mrs. Wallace," Harris said, producing a bottle from beneath the counter. As she waited, her gaze swept the room, briefly meeting Preston's before moving on. But in that moment, Preston felt oddly exposed, as if those clear green eyes had seen straight through him, past the dust and blood to the hollowed-out wreck of his soul. She paid for the whiskey and left without another glance, but Preston couldn't shake the unsettled feeling her brief attention had caused. He drained his glass and decided it was time to find a room for the night. The injury in his side was throbbing again, and he needed rest. The Georgetown hotel was modest but clean. The desk clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, assigned Preston a small room on the second floor. Preston paid for 3 nights in advance and headed upstairs, each step sending sharp pains through his side. In the privacy of his room, he peeled back his shirt to examine the wound. It looked worse, red, swollen, and seeping a yellowish fluid. Infection. He'd seen enough of it during the war to recognize the signs. He'd have to risk seeing the doctor after all. Morning arrived with Preston feverish and weak. He forced himself out of bed, splashed water on his face from the basin, and dressed with painful slowness. The doctor's office wasn't far, according to the hotel clerk's directions, but the short walk left Preston sweating and lightheaded. The sign on the tidy, whitewashed building read, "Dr. Henry Wallace, physician and surgeon." Preston hesitated at the door. Doctors kept records. Records meant questions, and questions were dangerous for a man with Preston's past. But the alternative was dying of infection in a hotel room, and he wasn't quite ready to meet his maker just yet. There were too many sins left unaccounted for. He pushed open the door and found himself in a clean, well-organized waiting room. Empty, thankfully. A door to an inner office opened, and Preston found himself facing the woman from the saloon. "Good morning," she said, then frowned slightly as she took in his appearance. "Are you unwell, sir?" "I'm looking for the doctor," Preston said, his voice rough. "My husband is away on a house call," she replied. "I'm Sarah Wallace. I assist him in his practice, and I can examine you if you'd like." Preston hesitated. A woman doctor wasn't what he'd expected, though he'd heard of such things. Still, the pain was getting worse, and he didn't have many options. "It's a gunshot wound," he admitted. "Going bad, I think." If she was surprised or suspicious, she didn't show it. "Come through to the examination room, Mr. Evans, Preston Evans." She nodded, leading him through to a bright, clean room with an examination table and various medical instruments arranged neatly on trays. "Please remove your shirt and sit on the table, Mr. Evans." Preston complied, gritting his teeth against the pain as he worked the buttons of his shirt and shrugged it off. Mrs. Wallace, Dr. Wallace, washed her hands thoroughly in a basin before approaching him. Her expression remained neutral as she examined the inflamed wound in his side. "This is indeed infected," she confirmed. "When did this happen?" "4 days ago." "And you treated it yourself?" Her fingers probed gently around the wound. Preston nodded. "Not poorly done," she conceded, "but the bullet fragments are still inside. They'll need to come out or the infection will worsen. I can perform the procedure, but it will be painful." "I'm no stranger to pain, madam." Something in his tone made her look up, meeting his eyes directly. "No," she said softly, "I don't imagine you are." Then, briskly professional again, "I'll need to give you something for the pain and to help you sleep while I work. Do you consent to that, Mr. Evans?" Preston didn't like the idea of being unconscious and vulnerable, but he trusted the steady hands and clear eyes of this woman more than he'd trusted anyone in a long time. "I do." She prepared a solution of morphine and administered it with practiced efficiency. As the drug began to take effect, Preston felt his muscles relax and his eyelids grow heavy. "Just let go, Mr. Evans." Dr. Wallace's voice seemed to come from far away. "You're in safe hands now." His last conscious thought was that he hadn't felt safe in years, and that it was a dangerous thing to start feeling now. Preston woke to the soft golden light of late afternoon filtering through curtained windows. He was lying on a narrow bed in a small room that was clearly not his hotel room. Medical texts lined a bookshelf on one wall, and the air smelled of antiseptic and herbs. He took inventory of his body. The fierce burning in his side had subsided to a dull ache. His head felt fuzzy, but his thoughts were clearing rapidly. He was dressed only in his undergarments, his torso wrapped in clean white bandages. The door opened, and Dr. Wallace entered, carrying a tray with a steaming cup and a bowl. "Ah, you're awake," she said, setting the tray on a small table beside the bed. "How do you feel?" "Better," Preston admitted. "Where am I?" "This is our recovery room behind the surgery. My husband and I keep it for patients who need observation." She helped him sit up, arranging pillows behind his back. "The procedure went well. I removed 3 bullet fragments and cleaned the wound thoroughly. You're fortunate another day and blood poisoning would have set in." She handed him the cup, which contained a bitter-smelling tea. "Drink this. It will help with the infection and the pain." Preston took the cup, his fingers brushing hers in the process. He noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring, which seemed odd for a married woman. "Your husband," he said. "He's still out on calls." A shadow crossed her face. "My husband passed away 2 years ago, Mr. Evans." "I continue his practice." Preston frowned. "But at the saloon they called you Mrs. Wallace." "It's simpler that way," she said matter-of-factly. "People in these parts are more comfortable taking medical advice from Mrs. Wallace, the doctor's widow, than from Dr. Sarah Wallace, female physician, though I trained alongside my husband at medical college in Boston." Preston studied her as he sipped the bitter tea. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with fine lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. Her hands were elegant but strong, the nails cut short for practical purposes. "Thank you," he said, "for tending to me and for not asking questions about the bullet wound. Your past is your own business, Mr. Evans. My concern is only with healing. Most folks wouldn't be so understanding." She smiled slightly. "I'm not most folks. Now you should eat something." She indicated the bowl of broth on the tray. "And then rest. I'd like to keep you here overnight for observation, if that's acceptable." It wasn't his usual practice to accept such charity, but Preston found himself nodding. "That would be appreciated. Good." She turned to leave but paused at the door. "Oh, and Mr. Evans, I took the liberty of sending someone to collect your things from the hotel. I hope that wasn't presumptuous." Preston stiffened. "My saddlebags are right there." She pointed to the corner where his belongings sat. "Untouched, I assure you." After she left, Preston checked his saddlebags immediately. Everything was there, including the wanted poster with his face on it, folded and hidden in a secret pocket. He relaxed marginally. Dr. Wallace Sarah seemed to be a woman of her word. He ate the broth, which was surprisingly flavorful, and then found himself drifting back to sleep, more peaceful than any rest he'd had in months. The next morning, Preston woke to the sound of voices, Sarah's, and a deeper male tone coming from the front of the building. He rose carefully, testing his strength. The pain was manageable and the fever was gone. He dressed quickly, wincing only slightly as he pulled on his shirt. When he emerged from the recovery room, he found Sarah speaking with the town sheriff, a broad-shouldered man with a neat mustache and watchful eyes. "Mr. Evans," Sarah greeted him. "This is Sheriff Miller. He was just asking after you." Preston's heart quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Sheriff," he nodded. "Mr. Evans," the sheriff returned evenly. "Dr. Wallace tells me you had a hunting accident." Preston glanced at Sarah, who met his gaze steadily. She had created a cover story for him. "Yes, sir." "Careless with my rifle. Won't make that mistake again." The sheriff looked skeptical but nodded. "Well, glad to see you're on the mend. We don't need any more casualties in these parts." He touched the brim of his hat. "Dr. Wallace, Mr. Evans." After the sheriff departed, Preston turned to Sarah. "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" "Lie for me." She busied herself organizing instruments on a tray. "I told you, Mr. Evans, your past is your own. Everyone deserves a chance to heal in all ways. You don't know what I've done." "No," she agreed, looking up at him. "But I know what suffering looks like, and I know that punishing yourself won't undo whatever it is you're running from." Preston felt exposed again under her perceptive gaze. "I should pay you for your services," he said, changing the subject as he reached for his money pouch. "There's no need. You can repay me by taking proper care of that wound. Change the dressing daily. I'll give you clean bandages and come back in 3 days so I can check your progress." When he began to protest, she added firmly, "I insist, Mr. Evans." Preston recognized the steel beneath her gentle manner and nodded reluctantly. 3 days, then." He left the doctor's office feeling strangely unmoored. For years, he'd kept moving, never connecting, never allowing himself comfort or kindness. Sarah Wallace's compassion disturbed the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself. He'd intended to find work at the mine, make some money, and move on as soon as possible. But now he was obligated to stay at least 3 more days. He told himself it was merely to ensure the wound healed properly. It had nothing to do with green eyes that saw too much or hands that touched without judgment. Preston spent the next 3 days taking odd jobs around town, helping at the livery, unloading supplies at the general store, repairing a roof for a widow. The work kept his hands busy and his mind from dwelling too much on Sarah Wallace. Georgetown was starting to feel less like a temporary stop and more like a place he could breathe. Nobody asked too many questions. The town had its share of men with mysterious pasts. The silver boom had drawn all types to the mountains. On the 3rd day, as promised, Preston returned to the doctor's office. It was late afternoon and the waiting room was empty. He knocked on the inner door and heard Sarah call, "Come in." She was at her desk, writing in a ledger, and looked up with a smile that made something twist in Preston's chest. "Mr. Evans, right on time." "Madam," he nodded, removing his hat. "How is the wound feeling?" "Better. Hardly bothers me at all now. Let's have a look, shall we?" Preston removed his shirt, noticing how Sarah's professional demeanor never wavered as she examined the healing wound. Her touch was clinical but gentle. "It's healing nicely," she confirmed. "You've been taking good care of it." "Had a good doctor," Preston said, surprising himself with the compliment. A slight flush colored her cheeks. "Well, the body has a remarkable capacity to heal itself given the right conditions." She stepped back. "You can put your shirt back on. I don't think you'll need further medical attention, though I'd advise avoiding strenuous activity for another week or so." Preston buttoned his shirt, feeling an unexpected reluctance to leave. "I understand you treated Jenkins' boy. How is he doing?" Sarah looked surprised by his interest. "Much better. The fever broke and he's regaining his strength." She tilted her head slightly. "You know, Mr. Jenkins found work at the assayer's office, regular hours, away from the dangers of mining. It seems he's determined to turn his life around." "Because of your kindness," Preston observed. "Sometimes people just need to be reminded of their own worth," she said simply. "A little kindness can go a long way." "Not everyone deserves kindness," Preston said darkly, thinking of his own past. Sarah regarded him thoughtfully. "Perhaps not. But I've found it's not my place to decide who does and doesn't deserve compassion, so I err on the side of giving it freely." She smiled slightly. "Even to mysterious cowboys with bullet wounds and troubled eyes." Preston felt that uncomfortable exposure again. "I'm not a good man, Dr. Wallace." "Sarah," she corrected him. "And good men rarely announce themselves as such. It's the ones who are so certain of their goodness that I find suspicious." She closed her medical bag with a snap. "Now, will you be staying in Georgetown, Mr. Evans, or are you continuing your travels?" It was a casual question, but Preston detected something beneath it: concern, perhaps, or even interest. "I haven't decided," he answered honestly. "I've found some work here, might stay a while longer." "I'm glad to hear it," she said. "Georgetown could use more skilled hands." Before Preston could respond, the office door burst open and a frantic-looking young man stumbled in. "Dr. Wallace, there's been an accident at the mine, cave-in, men trapped." Sarah sprang into action, grabbing her medical bag. "How many injured?" "Don't know yet." "They're still bringing them out, at least 5, maybe more." "I'll come right away." She turned to Preston. "Mr. Evans, I'm sorry, but I'll come with you," he said, already reaching for his hat. "I might be able to help." Gratitude flashed in her eyes. "Thank you." They hurried after the messenger, following him up the steep road that led to the Silver Queen mine. A crowd had gathered at the entrance, and mine workers were emerging from the shaft, carrying injured men on stretchers improvised from planks and canvas. Sarah immediately took charge, directing the placement of the injured, assessing wounds, and issuing instructions to the volunteers who had gathered to help. Preston was impressed by her calm efficiency in the face of chaos. "You," she pointed to Preston, "can you help me set up a triage area? We need to determine who needs immediate attention." For the next several hours, Preston worked alongside Sarah, holding lamps, passing instruments, applying pressure to wounds, and comforting the injured as she treated them. He'd seen battlefield injuries during the war, and some of these men reminded him of soldiers he'd fought with: brave men, broken by circumstances beyond their control. By nightfall, 3 miners had been treated and sent home with family members. 2 more seriously injured men had been stabilized and moved to the recovery room behind Sarah's office. One man had not survived, crushed beneath falling rock, dead before they could reach him. Sarah had conducted herself with unwavering professionalism throughout the crisis, but as she stood over the body of the dead miner, preparing him for his family, Preston saw the first crack in her composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the man's eyes. "His name was Thomas Wilkerson," she said quietly. 26 years old, he has a wife and a 2-year-old daughter." Preston stood beside her, uncertain what to do with the raw grief in her voice. "You did everything you could," he offered. "It's never enough," she whispered. "Not for the ones we lose." Impulsively, Preston reached out and took her hand. It was a brief touch, meant only to comfort, but the contact sent a jolt through him. Sarah looked up, surprise in her tear-bright eyes. "You saved lives today," he told her firmly. "That counts for something." She nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Yes, you're right." She squeezed his hand once before releasing it. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Evans. I couldn't have managed without you." "Preston," he said, "and I was glad to be of use." In the days that followed, Preston found himself spending more time at the doctor's office, helping to care for the injured miners. Sarah had praised his steady hands and calm demeanor with patience, and he discovered he had a knack for medical work. It reminded him of his time as a field medic during the war, before everything went wrong, before he became the man he now was. Working alongside Sarah, observing her dedication to her patients regardless of their station or circumstances, was changing something in Preston. He began to see Georgetown not as a temporary hideout, but as a community flawed, struggling, but bound together by shared hardships and moments of grace. A week after the mining accident, Preston was helping Sarah reorganize her medical supplies when Sheriff Miller appeared at the door. "Doctor." "Wallace," the sheriff nodded. "Evans." "Sheriff," Sarah greeted him warmly. "What can I do for you?" Miller shifted uncomfortably. "Got a situation over at the jail. One of my prisoners is running a high fever. Wonder if you might take a look." "Of course." Sarah reached for her bag. "Preston, would you mind accompanying me? I might need an extra pair of hands." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly at the use of Preston's first name and the obvious familiarity between them, but he made no comment. The walk to the jailhouse was brief. Inside, a single cell contained a young man huddled on a cot, shivering despite the summer heat. Sheriff Miller unlocked the cell and Sarah went directly to the prisoner's side. "What's his name?" she asked, laying a hand on his forehead. "Calls himself Jed Tucker," Miller replied. "Caught him trying to rob the stage office 2 days ago." Sarah examined the young man thoroughly, checking his pulse, listening to his breathing, and examining his throat. "It's not influenza," she announced finally. "Looks more like withdrawal. Opium, most likely," Miller sighed. "Figures. Found a pipe on him when I brought him in. He needs fluids, rest, and careful monitoring," Sarah said. "The next day or two will be difficult for him." "Can't spare a deputy to watch him round the clock," Miller said. "I can stay," Preston offered, surprising himself as much as the others. The sheriff looked doubtful. "No offense, Evans, but I don't know you well enough to leave you alone with a prisoner." "I'll vouch for him," Sarah said firmly. "Preston has been assisting me with patients for over a week now. He's skilled and trustworthy." Miller looked between them, his expression unreadable. "All right," he conceded, "but I'll be checking in regularly." For the next 2 days, Preston took shifts watching over Jed Tucker, administering the herbal remedies Sarah had prepared and making sure the young man didn't hurt himself during the worst of the withdrawal symptoms. During one lucid period, Jed told Preston his story orphaned young, drifting from town to town, finding temporary relief in opium dens. "Never meant to be a thief," Jed muttered. "Just needed money for the next pipe." "There are other paths," Preston told him, thinking of his own journey. "Easy for you to say," Jed retorted. "You ain't done the things I have." Preston's laugh was hollow. "Son, whatever you've done, I've done worse, trust me on that." Jed studied him with feverish eyes. "Then how come you're on that side of the bars?" It was a question that haunted Preston long after Jed had fallen back into restless sleep. When Sarah arrived to check on the patient that evening, she found Preston sitting in contemplative silence. "How is he?" she asked, setting down her bag. "Better. Fever's down." "He's keeping water down now, too." "Good." She examined Jed, who was sleeping more peacefully. "You've done well with him, Preston. He's young, made mistakes, deserves a chance to make things right." Sarah gave him a searching look. "Don't we all?" Preston said nothing, but later, as they walked back to her office together under a sky brilliant with stars, he found himself asking, "Do you ever wonder if some mistakes are too great to overcome?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I believe in redemption, Preston. Not the easy kind that comes from mere words or intentions, but the hard-won kind that's built day by day through actions and choices. What if there are things in your past that can't be undone? People who can't be brought back?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. In the moonlight, her expression was solemn but gentle. "Is that what haunts you? The people you couldn't save?" "The people I killed," Preston corrected her harshly. Sarah didn't flinch. "In the war, some," he admitted, "but after. There was a bank robbery in Missouri. It wasn't supposed to be violent, no one was supposed to get hurt, but things went wrong. A guard pulled his gun, there was shooting, a woman and her child. He couldn't continue." "You were there," Sarah said. "It wasn't a question." "I was one of the robbers," Preston confessed, waiting for her disgust, her fear. Instead, she asked quietly, "Did you pull the trigger?" "No, but I was part of it. I ran afterward, been running ever since." Sarah was silent for so long that Preston was sure she was searching for a way to extract herself from his presence. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "The dead cannot be brought back," she acknowledged, "but perhaps the living can be served. Perhaps that's how we honor those we've lost or harmed, by dedicating ourselves to healing and protecting others." "Is that what you think I'm doing?" Preston asked incredulously. "Atoning, aren't you? You stayed to help during the mine disaster. You've been caring for Jed Tucker. You've been assisting me with patients. These are not the actions of a man who only takes, they're the actions of a man who gives. It doesn't erase what I did." "No," she agreed, "but it matters all the same." They had reached her house, a modest 2-story structure beside her office. Sarah paused at the gate. "Would you like to come in for tea? It's been a long day." The invitation surprised him. "Are you sure that's wise, after what I told you?" "I believe I'm a good judge of character, Preston Evans." And while I don't condone your past actions, I see the man standing before me now, a man who is trying to be better. That's the man I'm inviting for tea." The simple acceptance in her words unlocked something in Preston's chest. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. Sarah's home was as neat and orderly as her medical office, but warmer, with comfortable furniture, shelves of books, and a few carefully chosen ornaments. She busied herself with preparing tea while Preston took in his surroundings. On the mantelpiece was a daguerreotype of Sarah with a tall, bespectacled man her late husband, Preston, assumed. They were both in formal attire, smiling slightly at the camera, their hands intertwined. "Henry," Sarah said, noticing his attention on the photograph. "We were married 8 years before he passed. Pneumonia of all things, a doctor who couldn't heal himself." There was old sorrow in her voice, but no bitterness. "You loved him very much," Preston observed. "I did. He was a good man, brilliant physician. He encouraged my interest in medicine when others thought it unfeminine." She handed Preston a cup of tea. "We came to Georgetown to establish a practice where we could both work as equals. When he died, I could have returned east to my family, but this place had become home. These people needed a doctor. And they got an exceptional one," Preston said sincerely. Sarah smiled, a hint of color touching her cheeks. "You're kind to say so, just truthful." They settled into a comfortable conversation, discussing the patients they'd treated, the recovery of the miners, and the progress Jed Tucker was making. As the evening wore on, Preston found himself sharing stories from his childhood in Tennessee, his time in the Army during the war, careful to avoid the darker chapters that came later. In turn, Sarah told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a professor, her battle to be accepted at medical college, and the challenges of being a female physician in the West. "Most men don't want a woman doctor," she admitted. "That's why I continue to use Mrs. Wallace professionally. It makes them think I'm merely extending my husband's practice rather than conducting my own." "It's their loss," Preston said. "You're the finest doctor I've met, man or woman." The warmth in Sarah's eyes at his praise made Preston's heart beat faster. It had been so long since he'd allowed himself to care about anyone, to see a future beyond the next town, the next temporary job. As he prepared to leave, standing at her door, he found himself reluctant to say goodnight. Sarah seemed to share his hesitation. "Thank you for the tea," he said. "And the conversation. Thank you for your honesty," she replied. "It can't have been easy to tell me about your past." "I've never told anyone before," Preston admitted, "but with you, it felt right." Their eyes held for a long moment. Preston felt himself drawn toward her but restrained himself. She was a respectable widow, a doctor, a pillar of this community. He was a wanted man with blood on his hands. "Good night, Sarah," he said finally, stepping back. "Good night, Preston," she answered softly. "I'll see you tomorrow." It was a question, an opening. Preston nodded. Tomorrow. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Preston continued to help Sarah in her practice, learning more about medicine and discovering a sense of purpose he'd thought lost forever. In the evenings, they often shared meals or cups of tea, talking late into the night. The connection between them deepened, though neither openly acknowledged the growing attraction. Preston took a room above the mercantile and found steady work as a carpenter's assistant. The owner, Mr. Fleming, praised his precision and attention to detail. "You've got a gift with your hands, Evans," he'd say. "Could make a real future in this trade if you wanted." A future. It was a concept Preston hadn't allowed himself to contemplate in years. But increasingly, when he thought about tomorrow, and the day after, and the months to come, he pictured himself in Georgetown. With Sarah. The fantasy was dangerously tempting, but reality had a way of intruding. One evening, as Preston was returning from delivering a cabinet to a customer outside town, he spotted a new wanted poster nailed to a post near the sheriff's office. His own face stared back at him, alongside the words "wanted for murder and robbery" and a reward of $500. His first instinct was to run, gather his things, and be gone before dawn. But the thought of leaving Georgetown, of leaving Sarah without a word, twisted like a knife in his gut. She deserved better than that. She deserved the truth, all of it, even if it meant she would turn away from him in disgust. He tore down the poster and tucked it inside his jacket, then made his way to Sarah's house. It was later than their usual meeting time, but a light still burned in her front window. She answered his knock promptly, her smile of welcome fading when she saw his expression. "Preston, what's wrong?" Wordlessly, he handed her the wanted poster. Sarah read it, her face paling slightly, then looked up at him. "Come inside," she said quietly. Once the door was closed behind them, Preston began to pace. "I should leave town, tonight, if someone recognizes me. Is this accurate?" Sarah interrupted, indicating the poster. "Did you murder these people?" Preston stopped pacing. "No, not directly. I told you about the bank robbery. I was there, but I didn't fire the shots that killed the woman and child. That was my partner, Blackwood." The name tasted bitter on his tongue. "But under the law, I'm just as guilty. And the other robberies listed here. Yes, I was part of Blackwood's gang for nearly a year. Until the bank in Missouri. After that, I couldn't. I took my share and ran, been on my own ever since." Sarah set the poster on a side table. "Why did you come to tell me this? You could have simply left." "Because you deserve to know who you've been harboring, and because—" Preston took a deep breath. "Because these past weeks with you have meant more to me than anything in my life for a very long time. I couldn't bear to leave without saying goodbye." Sarah studied him, her expression unreadable. "And if I asked you to stay?" "What?" Preston was certain he'd misheard. "If I asked you to stay in Georgetown, what would you say?" "I'd say you're not thinking clearly. I'm a wanted man, Sarah. There's blood on my hands." "Yes," she acknowledged, "and there's blood on mine too. I've lost patients I should have saved. I've made decisions that cost lives. The difference is you're punishing yourself for your mistakes while I've learned to live with mine." "It's not the same," Preston protested. "Isn't it? We've both caused harm. We've both tried to make amends. The question is whether you believe you deserve a second chance." "It's not about what I deserve," Preston said. "It's about what's right, and putting you at risk by staying here isn't right." Sarah moved closer to him, her green eyes intent on his face. "What if I believe the good you could do here outweighs the risk? What if I believe you deserve kindness, Preston?" "I don't," he said roughly. "I don't deserve your kindness or anyone else's." "Then I'll be kind enough for both of us," Sarah replied simply. The words struck Preston like a physical blow. He stared at her, this remarkable woman who saw him, truly saw him, and still offered compassion. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've come to care for you," she said. "More than I thought possible after losing Henry. Because I see the goodness in you that you refuse to acknowledge in yourself, and because everyone deserves a chance at redemption." Preston closed his eyes, overwhelmed by her faith in him. When he opened them again, Sarah was standing directly before him, her face upturned to his. "Stay," she said softly. "Not forever if you don't want to, but don't run away tonight." He should refuse. He should walk away from her, from this town, from this dangerous hope growing inside him. Instead, he found himself nodding. "All right, I'll stay, for now." Sarah's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Good, that's a start." That night, Preston lay awake in his rented room, turning over the conversation with Sarah. Her words echoed in his mind, "Then I'll be kind enough for both of us." No one had ever offered him such unconditional acceptance. It terrified him how much he wanted to believe in it, to believe he could be the man Sarah saw when she looked at him. The next morning, Preston rose early and went directly to the sheriff's office. It was a risk, but one he felt compelled to take if he was going to stay in Georgetown any longer. Sheriff Miller was at his desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked up in surprise when Preston entered. "Evans, what can I do for you?" Preston closed the door behind him. "I need to speak with you." "About my past." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, his expression cautious. "Go on." For the next half hour, Preston laid out his history, his time with Blackwood's gang, the robberies, the fateful day at the bank in Missouri, and his flight afterward. He didn't excuse or minimize his actions. He simply told the truth. When he finished, Miller was silent for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want to stay in Georgetown," Preston said honestly. "I've found something here worth staying for, but I can't build a life on lies, and I won't put this town or doctor." Wallace at risk. Miller's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Sarah. "You and the doctor have become quite close." "She knows everything I've just told you," Preston said. "She still believes I deserve a second chance." "I'm not sure I agree with her, but I want to try to be worthy of her faith in me." The sheriff drummed his fingers on his desk thoughtfully. "The law is clear on your crimes, Evans. As an officer of the court, I should arrest you right now." Preston nodded. "I understand." "However," Miller continued, "I've seen you these past weeks. How you helped during the mine disaster. How you worked with Jed Tucker, who, by the way, has taken a job at the livery and seems to be staying clear of opium. I've seen how the doctor looks at you and how you look at her." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street. "Georgetown needs good men, Evans, men who know the value of hard work and community, men who understand that their actions affect others." He turned back to Preston. "I'm not saying your slate is wiped clean. But if you're genuinely committed to making a new life here, to making amends for your past, well, I don't recall seeing any wanted posters that match your description." Preston stared at him in disbelief. "You do that. Look the other way." "I'm doing what I think serves justice best," Miller said firmly. "But understand this. If you ever revert to your old ways, if you bring any harm to this town or its people, I will personally see that you hang. Are we clear?" "Perfectly clear," Preston said, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Miller replied. "Thank Dr. Wallace. Her good opinion carries significant weight in this town, and Evans," he fixed Preston with a stern look, "don't make her regret defending you." "I won't, sir. You have my word." As Preston left the sheriff's office, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the desperate hope of escape or survival, but the steady hope of building something lasting. He went directly to Sarah's office to share the news. She was between patients, reviewing her notes, and looked up with a warm smile when he entered. "Preston, good morning." "I spoke with Sheriff Miller," he said without preamble. "Told him everything." Sarah's smile faded, replaced by concern. And he's allowing me to stay to start fresh." The relief in her eyes matched the feeling in his heart. "I'm glad," she said simply. "Very glad." Preston took a step closer to her desk. "There's something else I need to tell you, Sarah." "Yes, I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Preston hadn't planned to say them, they'd simply emerged, honest and unfiltered. Now that they were spoken, he found he didn't regret them, regardless of her response. Sarah stood slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "Preston, you don't need to say anything," he hurried to add. "I know it's too soon. I know I'm not the kind of man." "I love you too," she interrupted. Preston stopped, certain he'd misheard. "What?" Sarah came around the desk to stand before him. "I said I love you too. I think I have since the mining accident, when I saw how gently you treated those injured men. Or maybe since the day you told me about your past and I saw how deeply you regretted it." "Sarah," Preston breathed, reaching for her hands, "I have nothing to offer you. No name worth taking, no fortune, no, I don't want those things," she said firmly. "I want you. The man who helps me treat patients, the man who stayed with Jed Tucker during his withdrawal, the man who looks at me as though I'm something precious." "You are precious," Preston said fervently. "You're everything good in this world." Her smile was radiant. "No, I'm just a woman who recognizes a good man when she sees one." Preston couldn't resist any longer. He leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that became deeper when Sarah responded eagerly, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd find this," he confessed. "Never thought I deserved it." "Perhaps it's not about deserving," Sarah suggested softly. "Perhaps it's about accepting grace when it's offered and then extending it to others." Preston thought about that. "Is that what you've been doing, offering me grace?" "I've been offering you the same kindness and understanding I try to offer all my patients," Sarah said. "But loving you, that's something else entirely. That's a gift we give each other." A knock at the office door interrupted them. Sarah stepped back reluctantly. "My next patient," she explained. Preston nodded, suddenly aware of the impropriety of embracing in her professional space. "Can I see you tonight, for dinner at my place?" "Yes," Sarah answered without hesitation. "I'd like that very much." That evening, Preston prepared a simple meal in his small rented room. He'd never been much of a cook, but he wanted to make an effort for Sarah. The stew wasn't elegant, but it was hot and flavorful, and the bread he'd purchased from the bakery was fresh. Sarah arrived precisely at 7, wearing a dress of deep blue that highlighted her eyes. Preston had never seen her in anything but her practical working clothes, and the sight of her dressed for an evening with him made his heart race. "You look beautiful," he told her as he took her shawl. "Thank you," she said, a hint of shyness in her smile. "This was my favorite dress when Henry and I would attend concerts in Boston. I haven't had occasion to wear it since coming west." The mention of her late husband might have made another man jealous, but Preston found it reassuring. Sarah wasn't trying to forget her past or pretend it hadn't shaped her. She was simply making room in her heart for something new. They ate at the small table by the window, discussing their respective days. Sarah had treated a child with a broken arm and an elderly man with heart palpitations. Preston had completed a set of bookshelves for the schoolteacher and begun work on a cradle for a young couple expecting their first child. "You enjoy the work," Sarah observed. Preston nodded. "There's something satisfying about creating something useful with your hands, something that will last." "Like healing," Sarah suggested, "in a different way." "Yes, I suppose so, though your work is far more important." Sarah tilted her head thoughtfully. "I'm not sure that's true. You're building things people need, making their lives more comfortable and beautiful. That matters too." Her perspective continually surprised and moved him. Sarah saw value in things most people overlooked, found meaning in small kindnesses and everyday efforts. After dinner, they sat together on Preston's narrow bed, the only seating available besides the 2 chairs at the table, and talked about the future. "I've been thinking," Preston said, taking Sarah's hand. "If we're going to, that is, if you and I are." "Yes," Sarah prompted gently. "I want to do this properly," he said firmly. "I want to court you openly with respect. I want to build something real with you, Sarah, something that honors what you are to me." Sarah's eyes softened. "I'd like that very much. But I need to resolve my past first, completely." "What do you mean?" Preston took a deep breath. "The money from the robberies, I still have most of it hidden. I never felt right spending it. I need to return it, or at least make restitution somehow." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand. What do you plan to do?" "I'll write to the banks we robbed, anonymously, send back what I can, and—" He hesitated. "I want to find the family of the woman and child who were killed, make sure they're provided for." "That won't bring them back," Sarah said gently. "No, but it's something I can do, something concrete." "Then I'll help you," Sarah said firmly. "However I can." Preston raised her hand to his lips. "I don't deserve you." "There you go again," Sarah chided. "What did I tell you about that?" A smile tugged at Preston's lips. "That you'll be kind enough for both of us." "Exactly." She leaned forward and kissed him softly. "And I will be Preston Evans, for as long as you'll let me." Over the next 6 months, Preston and Sarah's relationship deepened and flourished. They courted openly, attending church services together, sharing meals, and taking Sunday afternoon walks through Georgetown streets or along the mountain paths outside town. The community accepted them as a couple with little surprise. Many had already noticed the connection between the doctor and her assistant, and most approved. Preston's carpentry skills and willingness to help wherever needed had earned him respect in Georgetown, while Sarah's position as the town's physician made her one of its most valued citizens. True to his word, Preston had anonymously returned money to the banks he'd helped rob during his time with Blackwood's gang. He'd also managed to locate the family of the woman and child killed during the Missouri robbery, a sister, who was raising the woman's surviving son. Through an intermediary, he'd established a trust for the boy's education. These acts of restitution didn't erase the past, but they allowed Preston to look toward the future with less guilt weighing on his conscience. And that future, he was increasingly certain, belonged with Sarah. On a crisp autumn evening, Preston took Sarah to a spot overlooking Georgetown, where the aspens were turning golden in the fading light. He had carved a small wooden box from cherry wood, polished to a warm glow, and inside it was a ring modest but elegant, with a single pearl set in silver. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he knelt before her, "you saw goodness in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You offered kindness when I thought I deserved none. You loved me when I was still learning how to love again." He opened the box, revealing the ring. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me?" Tears shimmered in Sarah's green eyes. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Preston Evans, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Preston felt a sense of wholeness he had never expected to find. This remarkable woman had not only healed his physical wounds, but had shown him that his soul could heal too, not through forgetting the past, but through acknowledging it and choosing, each day, to be better than he had been before. They were married in Georgetown's small church the following spring, with Sheriff Miller standing as Preston's best man, a development that still amused both men and Mrs. Jenkins, whose husband and son had been among Sarah's first patients in town, attending as Sarah's matron of honor. After the ceremony, as they greeted their well-wishers, Jed Tucker approached, no longer the desperate young man they'd treated for opium withdrawal, but a steady, clear-eyed young man with a future ahead of him. "Dr. Wallace, Mr. Evans," he said, shaking Preston's hand. "Congratulations to you both." "Thank you, Jed," Sarah smiled, "and please, today you must call me Sarah." "Yes, madam," Jed said, still respectful. He turned to Preston. "I wanted to tell you, I'm heading to Denver next month, got accepted into an apprenticeship program with a watchmaker there." "That's wonderful news," Preston said sincerely. "Wouldn't have happened without you too," Jed said. "You helped me when no one else would, showed me I could be more than my mistakes." He glanced between them. "Guess that's why you two make such a good pair. You both see the best in folks, even when they can't see it in themselves." After Jed moved on, Preston squeezed Sarah's hand. "He's right, you know, you do see the best in people." "As do you," Sarah countered. "You just needed someone to remind you of it." Preston thought about the long journey that had brought him to this moment: the war, the crimes, the years of running, and finally, the unexpected grace of finding home and love in Georgetown. "I still don't know if I deserve this happiness," he admitted quietly. Sarah reached up to touch his face. "And I'll still be kind enough for both of us," she promised. "Until you learn to be kind to yourself as well." Preston smiled down at his bride, his heart full. "I'm working on it," he said. "With you beside me, I think I might just manage it someday." "We have time," Sarah said. "All the time in the world." And they did. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Sarah continued her medical practice, eventually training a young female doctor to assist her as the town grew. Preston's carpentry business flourished, his pieces becoming sought after throughout the county for their quality and artistry. 2 years after their wedding, Sarah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Henry, after her first husband, a choice that reflected Sarah's belief that love wasn't diminished by being shared, but multiplied. 3 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, who inherited her mother's green eyes and her father's quiet determination. Preston never fully escaped his past. There were nights when the nightmares returned, when the faces of those harmed by his actions visited his dreams. But Sarah was always there when he woke, her presence a reminder that redemption wasn't a destination but a daily choice. As their children grew, Preston and Sarah made sure they understood the value of compassion, the importance of seeing beyond surfaces to the worth in every person. They taught by example, opening their home to those in need, offering second chances to those society had written off. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch of the home Preston had built with his own hands, watching the sun set behind the mountains, he would sometimes turn to Sarah and say, "Thank you for being kind enough for both of us." To which she would always reply with a smile that still made his heart skip a beat, "You don't need me to be kind for you anymore, Preston. You've learned to do that yourself." And she was right. The man who had ridden into Georgetown believing he was beyond redemption had discovered that healing was possible, that forgiveness, even self-forgiveness, could be found, and that love, once accepted, could transform even the most wounded heart. In the end, it wasn't just Sarah's kindness that saved Preston Evans. It was his willingness, finally, to accept it, to believe that he was worthy of the love she offered so freely. And in that acceptance, he found not only personal salvation but the strength to extend the same grace to others, creating a legacy of compassion that would outlive them both.